For 15 years, Steve Harvey had mastered the unexpected on Family Feud. Outrageous answers, awkward family revelations, and countless surprises. But on a seemingly routine Tuesday taping in April 2024, the veteran host encountered a moment that left him utterly speechless. When 3-year-old Marcus Williams from Detroit stepped up to the Fast Money podium, no one could have anticipated what would unfold. As Marcus began sharing his background during the pre-round interview, Steve noticed a strange commotion at the studio entrance. Security staff were speaking urgently into headsets. Producers were huddled in whispered conversation, and a man who looked remarkably like Marcus had appeared at the back of the audience. What happened next would bring the production to a complete halt, transform a game show into the setting for a 3-decade mysteries resolution, and remind millions of viewers about the extraordinary ways family connections can transcend time, distance, and circumstance. Marcus Williams carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had overcome significant challenges. At 53, his salt and pepper hair was closely cropped, his posture military straight, a remnant of his 8 years of service in the Army. He wore a carefully pressed blue button-down shirt and khaki slacks, his only adornment a small pin on his lapel displaying the Detroit skyline. The Williams family had been selected for Family Feud after Marcus's daughter Kendra, a high school counselor, submitted an application highlighting their remarkable resilience. The family team included Marcus, his wife Teresa, a nurse, Kendra, their son Michael, who worked alongside Marcus in the automotive restoration business they had built together, and Marcus's younger sister Angela, a middle school principal. What the application hadn't revealed, what wasn't part of the family's on-camera introduction, was the profound loss that had shaped Marcus's life from childhood. At age 12, Marcus had experienced a trauma that would haunt him for decades. His identical twin brother Matthew had disappeared during a family trip to a crowded state fair in Michigan. Despite extensive searches, police investigations, and the family's tireless efforts, Matthew was never found. The case had gone cold after several years, leaving the family with unresolved grief and endless questions. This tragedy had profoundly shaped Marcus's life choices. His military service, his protective parenting style, and his community volunteer work with missing persons organizations all stemmed from that formative loss. While Marcus rarely spoke about Matthew, those closest to him understood that the absence of his twin remained a constant presence in his life. Teresa had met Marcus after his military service, when he was already well into adulthood. She had come to understand the quiet sadness that occasionally overtook him, particularly around his birthday, a day that had once been a shared celebration with his twin. Their children had grown up knowing about their Uncle Matthew, primarily through old photographs and the stories Marcus's mother would share before her passing 5 years earlier. As the Williams family prepared for their Family Feud appearance, Matthew wasn't explicitly mentioned, but his absence was acknowledged in subtle ways. Marcus wore his twin's birth month on his wristwatch, set permanently to the date they had last been together. Angela had brought a childhood photo of the twins to keep in her pocket for good luck. These private tributes were their way of including Matthew in this family milestone. During the pre-show preparation, the producers had noted Marcus's compelling personal story of building a successful business after his military service, his commitment to family, and his community involvement. What they couldn't have known was that their show was about to become the setting for an extraordinary reunion that would resolve a mystery spanning 3 decades. As Marcus approached the Fast Money podium, Steve Harvey engaged in his usual pre-round banter. "So, Marcus, I understand you restore classic cars in Detroit?" Marcus nodded, his deep voice steady. "Yes, my son Michael and I have a shop specializing in American classics from the 50 seconds and 60 seconds. We bring history back to life, one vehicle at a time." "That's fantastic work," Steve replied. "Now, what drives that passion for restoration? Bringing back something that seems lost. There's usually a story behind that kind of dedication." Marcus paused, something shifting in his expression. For a moment, it seemed he might share the deeper motivation behind his life's work, the brother who had never been found. But before he could respond, a commotion at the back of the studio drew everyone's attention. The Williams family had performed admirably through the main portion of the game, accumulating enough points to advance to the Fast Money round. Marcus and Kendra had been selected to play this final challenge. With Marcus going second, meaning he would be isolated backstage, while Kendra answered the initial set of questions. After Kendra completed her turn, scoring a respectable 124 points, it was time for Marcus to return to the stage. As he took his position at the podium, Steve Harvey began with his customary interview to establish rapport before the timed round. "Now, Marcus, while you were backstage, your daughter did pretty well," Steve explained. "You need 76 points to win the $20,000. But before we start the clock, tell me a little bit about yourself. I understand you're originally from Lansing?" Marcus nodded. "Born and raised there until I was 12. That's when our family moved to Detroit after." He hesitated, then continued, with practiced vagueness, "After a family situation changed everything for us." Steve, sensing there might be more to the story but respecting Marcus's privacy, smoothly transitioned. "And I understand you recently celebrated a birthday?" "Last month. Turned 53. Marcus smiled slightly. "Never thought I'd make it this far, to be honest." "Well, you're looking good for 53, Steve replied. "What's your secret?" Marcus's answer revealed a glimpse of his deeper philosophy. "Living each day with purpose. When you've lost something important, you learn to make every moment count." It was at this exact moment that a disturbance at the studio entrance caught everyone's attention. Several production assistants were speaking urgently into their headsets. The executive producer had stepped away from her position to approach a man who had entered at the back of the audience seating area. Steve, ever the professional, attempted to maintain focus on the game. "Well, looks like we've got a little excitement happening. But let's get back to—" He stopped mid-sentence, his gaze fixed on the newcomer who had moved into better view. The stranger was now standing in the aisle, staring intently at Marcus. The resemblance was unmistakable. The man appeared to be Marcus's mirror image, same height, same facial structure, same distinctive Williams family eyes. The only significant differences were his slightly thinner build, longer hair, and the visible trembling of his hands as he gripped the back of an audience seat for support. Marcus hadn't yet turned to see what had captured Steve's attention. His focus remained on the game, waiting for the first fast money question. But as murmurs rippled through the audience, Marcus finally glanced over his shoulder. The studio fell completely silent as Marcus froze, his hand gripping the podium with such force his knuckles whitened. For several seconds, an eternity in television time, he simply stared, his expression transforming from confusion to disbelief, to something approaching awe. "Matthew?" The name escaped as barely a whisper, yet the microphones caught it clearly. The stranger nodded, tears now streaming openly down his face. "Marcus," he responded, his continuum, voice breaking. "It's me." What followed was perhaps the most extraordinary moment ever captured on a game show. Marcus stepped away from the podium, moving as if in a trance toward the man claiming to be his long-lost twin. The audience, understanding they were witnessing something profound, but not yet comprehending its full significance, remained hushed. Steve Harvey, recognizing that something unprecedented was unfolding, held up his hand to the producers off-camera, silently signaling them not to intervene or cut to commercial. As Marcus and the man claiming to be Matthew approached each other in the center of the studio, the Williams family reacted with varying expressions of shock. Angela, Marcus's sister, who had been old enough to remember Matthew, gasped audibly and rose from her seat. Teresa and the children remained frozen in confusion, witnessing an encounter with someone they had only known through photographs and stories. "Is it really you?" Marcus asked, now standing directly before his apparent twin, studying his face with intense focus. "Where have you been? What happened to you?" Before Matthew could answer, Marcus reached out tentatively to touch his brother's face, as if confirming he wasn't an apparition. Then, in a sudden movement, he pulled Matthew into a fierce embrace that unleashed decades of contained emotion. The studio erupted in spontaneous applause as the twins clung to each other, both now openly weeping. Even the production crew, Veteran professionals who had witnessed countless emotional moments on the show appeared visibly moved. Several camera operators could be seen wiping away tears while maintaining their professional duties. Steve Harvey, overwhelmed by the unfolding scene, removed his signature glasses and wiped his eyes. When he replaced them, he made a decision unprecedented in his hosting career. He turned to the producers and spoke firmly. "We're stopping everything. Right now." The red recording lights remained on, capturing a moment too extraordinary to miss, but Steve made it clear this was no longer about the game. "Family Feud can wait," he announced to the audience. "Some reunions are more important than television." The production team quickly transformed the studio environment to accommodate this unexpected development. Additional chairs were brought to the stage area. The game show apparatus, buzzers, scoreboards, and timers, was temporarily forgotten as the Williams family and Matthew gathered in a circle at center stage. Steve Harvey, having removed his suit jacket in a symbolic setting aside of his host persona, sat with them, no longer the entertainer, but simply a compassionate witness to an extraordinary human moment. "Matthew," Steve began gently after the initial emotions had somewhat settled, "I think everyone here would like to understand what happened. Only if you're comfortable sharing, of course." Matthew nodded, his resemblance to Marcus even more striking as they sat side by side. His voice, when he finally spoke, carried the slight accent of someone who had spent considerable time in another country. "I've been trying to find my family for over 20 years, he began, his words measured, as if each had been carefully considered during a long journey. "But the search was complicated because I didn't know my real name until I was in my 30s. The studio audience, now understanding they were witnessing the resolution of a decades-old mystery, listened in complete silence. Matthew explained that on that day at the Michigan State Fair in 1983, he had become separated from his family. Near a crowded exhibit, disoriented and frightened, he had wandered into a parking area where he was approached by a couple who offered to help find his parents. They seemed kind, Matthew recalled, the pain of childhood betrayal still evident in his voice. They gave me water, said they would drive me to the fair's security office. I was only 12 and didn't understand what was happening until we were on the highway heading north. Angela, who had joined them on stage, covered her mouth in horror. The police searched that whole area, she said. They interviewed everyone who had been near where we last saw you. Matthew nodded grimly. The couple Robert and Diane Keller had planned it carefully. They had no children, wanted a son, and had specifically looked for a child who was momentarily alone. He revealed that the Kellers had taken him to a remote area of northern Ontario, Canada, where they lived off-grid in a small community suspicious of outside authority. They had told everyone Matthew was their son who had previously lived with relatives. They told me if I revealed the truth, I would be taken by the Canadian authorities and put in a horrible institution, Matthew explained. At 12, isolated and frightened, I eventually stopped fighting. They homeschooled me, limited my contact with others, and gradually I adapted. The audience gasped at this revelation of calculated abduction disguised as rescue. Marcus gripped his brother's shoulder, his expression reflecting both rage at what had happened and profound relief at having finally found him. What changed? Steve asked. How did you eventually discover the truth and find your way here today? Matthew's story continued with the death of Robert Keller when Matthew was in his early 30s. While sorting through Keller's personal effects, he had discovered a locked box containing newspaper clippings about his disappearance, his original birth certificate, and photographs of the Williams family. Seeing those articles was like waking from a decades-long nightmare, Matthew said. I finally had proof of who I really was. But the path to reunion had been far from straightforward. The Kellers had created a false identity for Matthew, and he had lived for over 20 years as Daniel Keller. Navigating the legal complexities of reclaiming his true identity while in Canada had taken years, complicated by the lack of formal education and resources. When Diane Keller died 5 years ago, I was finally free to search openly, Matthew explained. But by then, the trail had gone cold. Our mother had passed away. The family had moved from Lansing. Every lead seemed to end in disappointment. Then, 3 weeks earlier, Matthew had seen a promotional commercial for the upcoming Family Feud episode featuring the Williams family. The brief clip had shown Marcus, and Matthew had immediately recognized his twin despite the passing decades. I contacted the network, tried to explain, but understandably, they were skeptical, Matthew said. It took weeks of calls, emails with old family photos, and finally, DNA proof I'd obtained years ago when I first discovered my true identity. The executive producers stepped forward to confirm this part of the story. Matthew contacted us repeatedly. Initially, we thought it might be someone trying to disrupt the show. But his persistence and the evidence he provided became impossible to ignore. We arranged for him to be here today, though we had no idea how extraordinary this moment would be. Steve turned to Marcus. And you had no idea? No feeling that your twin might still be out there? Marcus shook his head, emotion making it difficult to speak. I never stopped hoping, but after so many years. He gathered himself. There were moments when I felt something I couldn't explain. Our mother always insisted Matthew was still alive. She said she could feel it. I wanted to believe her, but after decades of disappointment. Teresa, who had been quietly supporting her husband throughout this revelation, spoke up. Marcus has had dreams about his brother for years. He would wake up sometimes saying he'd been talking to Matthew. We thought it was just his way of processing grief. Matthew's eyes widened. I had those dreams too. I would wake up certain I had been speaking to someone named Marcus, even before I knew that was my twin's name. The Kellers told me it was just imagination. Steve Harvey, who had been listening intently, addressed the twins directly. What you're describing, that connection, that persisted despite everything designed to sever it, that's something science might not fully explain, but many of us understand in our hearts. He turned to address the audience, and by extension, the millions who would eventually watch this extraordinary reunion. Folks, we talk about family on this show every day. We make jokes, we play games, we have fun with the concept, but what we're witnessing right now is the true meaning of family. A bond so powerful, it can survive decades of separation, false identities, and international boundaries. The Williams family, now expanded by one, gathered in a tight circle. Angela, who had been silent through much of the exchange, finally found her voice. Our mother never gave up, she said, addressing Matthew directly. Every year on your birthday, she would make 2 cakes, one for Marcus and one for you. She would say, somewhere, he's turning another year older, and we need to honor that. This revelation proved too much for Matthew, who broke down completely. Decades of complex emotions finally finding release. Marcus held his brother, their identical faces, mirroring the same profound relief and lingering pain. Steve, recognizing the need for the family to process this moment away from cameras and an audience, made another unprecedented decision. Ladies and gentlemen, he addressed the studio audience, we're going to take an extended break now. This family deserves some private time together. But before the cameras could cut away, Steve had one final announcement. And as for the game, the $20,000 prize that was at stake, that's already been won. In fact, I'm personally doubling it to $40,000 for the Williams family. The audience erupted in applause as Steve continued. Some moments transcend the game. What we've witnessed today isn't just good television, it's a reminder of the connections that define our humanity. The episode featuring the Williams twins' reunion aired 6 weeks later, carefully edited with the family's full cooperation and approval. The producers, initially concerned about deviating so dramatically from the show's format, quickly recognized they had captured something extraordinary, a genuine human moment that transcended entertainment. The public response was immediate and overwhelming. The episode became the most watched in Family Feud history, with clips of the reunion accumulating over 100 million views online within days. Williams twins. And number 3, Zero-Year Mystery trended across social media platforms as viewers shared their emotional reactions, and in many cases, their own stories of family separation and reconnection. For Marcus and Matthew Williams, the weeks following their on-air reunion were filled with intensive catching up, healing, and reintegration. Matthew temporarily moved into Marcus and Teresa's home in Detroit, beginning the complex process of rebuilding his life in the United States after decades in Canada. The legal aspects alone were daunting. Matthew had lived as Daniel Keller for over 30 years, accumulating a life history, work records, and identity documents under that name. Reclaiming his legal identity as Matthew Williams required navigating complex international bureaucracy, a process complicated by the criminal nature of his original abduction. The FBI reopened the decades-old kidnapping case, based on Matthew's testimony. Though Robert and Diane Keller had both passed away, their actions had legal implications for Matthew's citizenship status and identity restoration. The involvement of federal agencies brought media attention that extended far beyond the Family Feud appearance. 3 months after the reunion, Steve Harvey hosted a special 1-hour documentary titled The Twin Connection: The Williams Brothers' Journey Home. The program followed Marcus and Matthew as they visited significant places from their childhood, met with surviving relatives who had never given up hope, and began the process of rebuilding their brotherhood. Some of the most powerful moments in the documentary came from Matthew's gradual integration into the family business. Marcus's automotive restoration shop had always specialized in bringing damaged classics back to their original condition, a metaphorical echo of his own life's missing piece. Matthew, who had worked as a carpenter in Canada, brought complementary skills in woodworking that proved valuable for interior restoration projects. "There's something profoundly healing about working side by side," Marcus explained during the documentary. "We're restoring these vehicles together, but really, we're restoring ourselves." The documentary also revealed the broader impact of their story. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children reported a significant increase in tips and renewed interest in long-cold cases following the Williams reunion. Several families who had never given up searching for missing children found renewed hope and determination. In response, Steve Harvey announced the establishment of the Williams Reunion Foundation with an initial personal donation of $250,000. The foundation would provide resources for families seeking long-lost relatives, including genetic testing, legal assistance, and travel funds for reunions. What began as an extraordinary moment on our show has grown into something much more significant, Steve explained during the foundation's launch. "The Williams brothers have shown us that it's never too late for healing, never too late for truth, and never too late for family to find its way back together." 6 months after their reunion, Marcus and Matthew appeared together on several national talk shows, sharing their story and raising awareness about both child abduction prevention and the importance of never abandoning hope in missing persons cases. Their message resonated particularly powerfully because it offered something rare in such cases: a happy ending after decades of uncertainty. Matthew, who had gradually adjusted to his reclaimed identity, spoke eloquently about the psychological challenges of his journey. "I lived as Daniel Keller longer than I lived as Matthew Williams," he explained during one interview. "Integrating these two identities, the person I was born to be and the person I was forced to become, that's a daily process. But having my true family beside me makes all the difference." For the Williams family, the most meaningful development came 1 year after the reunion, when Matthew moved into his own home, just 2 blocks from Marcus and Teresa. The twin brothers, separated for 30 years, now began each day with a morning coffee together before heading to their shared business. The small ritual became symbolic of their extraordinary journey, a daily affirmation that even the most profound losses might someday find resolution. That connections between family members can transcend time, distance, and deliberate separation. On the anniversary of their reunion, Family Feud aired a follow-up segment featuring the Williams family, now including Matthew, returning to the studio, where their extraordinary story had come full circle. The family played a celebrity charity edition of the game, raising funds for the Williams Reunion Foundation and organizations supporting families of missing children. As Steve Harvey welcomed them back to the stage, he reflected on the profound impact their story had made. 1 year ago, we witnessed something on this stage that transcended entertainment, he told the audience. We saw the power of family bonds that refuse to be broken by time or distance. The Williams brothers remind us all that some connections exist beyond what we can explain and that it's never too late for healing, never too late for reunion, never too late to solve even a 30-year mystery. The episode closed with Marcus and Matthew standing together at the Fast Money podium, where their reunion had begun, no longer strangers separated by decades of absence, but brothers completing each other's sentences, their mirrored smiles, reflecting the extraordinary journey that had brought them full circle. As the cameras prepared to cut away, Steve asked them a final question. After everything you've experienced, what would you tell others who are still searching for missing loved ones? Marcus and Matthew exchanged a glance. That twin connection now fully restored, and answered in perfect unison. Never stop looking. Never stop believing. The most important connections cannot be permanently broken. Their story continued to inspire millions, a powerful reminder that even in our fragmented world, the bonds of family can sometimes find their way home against impossible odds.